You're listening to Trek FM.
Want to join in the conversation and share your thoughts on this episode? Join the Babel Conference, our listeners' discussion group on Facebook. Just type BABEL into the Facebook search field, and we'll look forward to seeing you there.
This is Steve Sansweet of Rancho Obi-Wan, and you're listening to the 602 Club.
Well, welcome to the 602 Club. We're so excited to have you, and I'm just one of the hosts here, Matthew Rushing, and with me, as she is every single week, the one and only, the cowgirl Christy.
That's Mad Dog to you?
I thought you didn't like going by that name.
Oh, that's right.
Dang it. Oh, man. Well, we are wrapping up the Back to the Future movies, which is super exciting that we've made it through all of them, and been a really fun series to do, especially since they'd just been re-released in 4K and everything. So I'm so excited to have you all with us. But before we dive into the show, quick reminder, you can find us wherever you get your podcasts. If you're on Apple Podcasts, please give us a star rating and review. We got a brand new review, Christy, from hashtag Another Happy Landing, and it says, Superman smiles from space upon this podcast. I personally love this show. Matt and Christy are positive and uplifting about all fandoms. I love Star Wars, Marvel, Back to the Future, and thanks to you guys, the DC films, especially The Dark Knight. Love you all. Love this show. Christopher Reeve, Brandon Routh, and Henry Cavill all passed their kryptonite approval. Cheers to the 602 Club.
Wow, thank you. Oh, that's so genuine and kind. I really, that means a lot to me.
Yeah, me too. I mean, we just appreciate that, people spend some time and give us a review, help people find the show like that, because it really does make a difference. And to hear such glowing reviews is fantastic. But yeah, I mean, even when we haven't had as many movies coming out, I think we've both had fun just being able to dive back into movie archives, and there's so many great things to talk about.
Absolutely. And I mean, thank you too to Another Happy Landing for calling out all of the Supermen. Because, yeah, I mean, gosh, all of them are awesome. And you know how much Matt and I love Henry Cavill too. So.
Yes. Yeah, we were geeking out earlier today just about his new post about Witcher. So, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Well, yeah. So we'll be looking forward to that coming out. Of course, you can find us anywhere you get your podcast, though. You don't have to be an Apple Podcast. There's Spotify. There's Amazon Music. There's all the different podcatchers out there. So just find the 602 Club. You can find us on Twitter, though. Follow the show at the 602 Club, and we're on Instagram at the 602 Club TFM. So if you're listening to this show and you haven't followed us there, please do. We've really been enjoying, interacting with people in that way. It's been a lot of fun. And plus, we use it as an opportunity not only to share what's going on here on the show, but, there's so much movies news coming out. So it's a great place to talk about that and TV news and all that kind of stuff. So we can keep up with that through the 602 Club on Twitter. And you can find us on Facebook at facebook.com/TrackFM. We've got the listeners only discussion group over there called the Babel Conference that you can join listeners from all over the world talking about what's going on in here in the network. We're on Trek.fm, the website. And then, of course, you can go over to Trek.fm/contact if you would like, and you can send Christy and I an email. So many different places to catch up with us. And I can't believe where I talk about this, but, the year is winding down, Christy. And we found out that we are actually going to get to cover, Wonder Woman this year, because it's going to be coming to theaters where theaters are open, as well as HBO Max. And so we're excited to have a massive, big movie that's going to be coming out. So we are planning on doing that when that happens there at the end of December. So make sure you subscribe to HBO Max. They're not a sponsor of the show, but I'm just saying you should be subscribed so you can watch it. And they've got a lot of other cool stuff. So Christy, this is obviously the end of the Back to the Future films. And one of the most interesting parts about this is that, we kind of jump into a completely new genre of a Western. here with this film. And I would say, honestly, one of the fun things about the series is that we get to explore lots of different types of genres in one series, whether it's, time travel movies or science fiction, action, and now we go to the Old West. And so I just wondered for you, as we're wrapping up this series, how does it work for you, the fact that we travel back so far in time to the Old West and make this kind of the main setting for almost the entire movie?
Well, I think that this will tell you exactly how I feel about it. The fact that I grew up watching McClintock should tell you how I felt about going into a Western. So I loved it.
Yeah, I totally understand that. I'm also just like you. I grew up not only watching McClintock, but so many of his movies. I legitimately adore Westerns. I grew up on them. And so for me, it was definitely, I think, a really big deal to be able to have this movie, turn into a Western was a really fun idea for me. And I think it's interesting, too, because one of the things is watching the behind-the-scenes extras, I noticed is that, the people behind the scenes, like Zemeckis and Gale, who's the writer here, they love Westerns as well. And, that's something that is something they had grown up with and they really enjoyed as kids and they wanted to do. And I think that that's something that's really special because I feel like it shows in this movie. It shows the fact that they love Westerns, that they want to do a Western. And I think that's really neat. That's the case, because you can have an idea of wanting to do something, but I think actually making it like having a passion for it makes a big difference. And I think again, it's that passion here that I really get a sense for, and I think there's just something. We had our issues, both of us, with the second movie, but I'm rambling here, and I'm sorry, but I feel like that the passion they have for the idea of it being a Western made this movie so much better than their previous attempt.
Yeah, and I'm glad you brought up behind-the-scenes things, too, because I was surprised to hear that apparently it was Michael J. Fox's idea back when they were filming the original to possibly set part of it in the Old West, and they kind of put it on the back burner and then ended up using it in this one. So I'm really glad that they decided to come back to that idea. And absolutely, I think that you can tell that they love Westerns and really wanted to make this as realistic looking in the places that they filmed it, and building either the best looking set piece they could or finding a way to actually have something real and, practical that's working, and not just, a built set. So it was cool to see that they actually, filmed parts of it in places that would look like the Old West. Like when they pan over that first shot of seeing Hill Valley. So I think that you see that too, even in the very end. I think that possibly the best part of the whole movie to me is that train chase at the end, because that's a trademark of great Westerns too, is having some kind of a chase like that. And, with the steam train, it's so cool.
Yeah, I think, you mentioned something that I think really stands out to me in this movie, which is that by doing the Western, they had a big challenge on their plate, which is to create the feel of a Western. And that's not always easy to do. I think one of the things, about Westerns is that you really need to have a really good setting. And then the production value of that Western is going to make a big difference on how good it looks. And I think that's kind of one of the things that really, stood out to me is how good the production value of this film is, and the fact that, one of the things that they did is they filmed this whole setting, and they built this whole little town that they use. And I think that's the thing that really stood out to me, is just how much time and effort that they put into this, and how much they believed in this idea that they would do that. I mean, that's a lot of money to put into, because they built this whole town for them to use. And I think, to me, that's the thing that really stands out, is just you really kind of put your money where your mouth is. Okay, we're going to do a Western, we're going to film it, but then not only are we going to do that, but we're also going to make sure that the place that we film, we make it feel authentic as possible, and I think what we came to is the fact that it really does feel like those Westerns that we grew up with, with the look and the feel and everything that they put into it. And I was just really impressed with that personally. And I think for me, having gotten a chance to watch these in 4K, I was absolutely astounded by just how well the production value of this movie holds up. I did not expect this movie to hold up in the way that it does, and the look and the feel, because, I think the other two movies, they look great, but this one, because they shoot most of it outside, it's in this set that they've built, it just looks phenomenal. And it still looks like, honestly, for the most part, I don't know if you'd agree with me, but I feel like this movie looks like it's a movie that could have just been made yesterday, for the most part.
Yeah, I think that they do a great job of that with the way that they do the filming style, where they said that, some parts of it were even done with a little bit of a sepia tone to it. Mm-hmm. So it's not too much effects on things. It is mostly practical things. And so I do think that it stands up for that reason, especially that they, built the town and didn't use CG or something like that to build it out digitally. So yeah, I think that it also I think it's good that they focused not so much on things that were historical for 1885 that would have been outside of the scope of the story they're telling. Mm-hmm. The brief moment in the beginning where they focused on the joke that there might be Indians there when he gets there, and then he, gets there and they are, but it's just kind of a aside.
No, I think you're 100% right. I think one of the things that this does is that kind of just creates that Western movie joke. But then we don't, that's not what we're here to focus on.
Right.
We're here to kind of tell the story that we're telling, with these characters specifically. And I think that's what makes it work. And because they know they're not trying to litigate the validity of how Westerns have portrayed the West. That's not the point of this movie, and I think it's good for them for not even trying to do that. And it works in the sense of the storytelling, because I think one of the things that it really does is that I think the setting of the West also puts Marty as well as Doc in a completely unfamiliar place where neither of them is completely in control of their situation. There's no comfort level for either of them in this place. In 1955, Doc is still Doc there. He's just a younger version. And here you're putting both of them in a place where they're not quite familiar with, so you got the fish out of the water stuff to do, as well as just, I think, placing them not always at ease. And I think that's a good idea for these characters, with this last movie, especially since they talk about the idea that this movie is really about trying to make these characters kind of grow some more. And so by putting it in the Old West, in a place where neither of them has familiarity, I think it just really works. All in all, I think this was a great choice for them to really do something different, to be able to have some fun, and at the same time, just create a rip-roaring good movie, which is kind of, what you want for this final adventure for these characters. And I would say specifically for myself, coming off of part 2, that's what I want.
Yeah, and two, that you want some more growth for them. That I think it was a really interesting thing too that Zemeckis himself said. He felt like the previous movies, they got a little too materialistic, like that Marty's big thing is that he wants the nice car and to take his girlfriend to the lake and stuff, but that it wasn't as much about the human interest part of it and like growth as a person or thinking about the people in your life as much as it focused a lot on the stuff.
Yeah.
And so this one, he actually wanted to focus on that growth as a person.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. And I think it really does just a great job of allowing us to, like you said, just focus on character. And also, I think, after that second movie too, I think that this allows us to have fun, but still keep the tension. Mm-hmm. And I think that's the thing that's really cool is that because that's what you want in this last movie. You really do want some serious tension, I think, to be building, with the characters and with the situation they're in and making it dire and all of those kind of things. That's exactly what you want to have happen. But at the same time, I think you maybe want this to end up in a much more, quote unquote, I would say, fun place. And I think it does. I think that's it. By setting in the West, it gives you the opportunity we're going to ramp up a lot of tension, but at the same time, we're going to have a really good time doing it. And there's lots of good jokes that they make, with them getting dressed like this ridiculous, urban cowboy, and coming back, he's like, who put you in that ridiculous outfit? And it's like, you did, so,
and going by Clint Eastwood.
Exactly. I mean, classic. Or even, kind of dressing like Clint Eastwood does. He definitely has a Clint Eastwood vibe. So I think all of that just works for the movie. So.
Yeah. And I had to add in there, speaking of the West, the saloon guys. Did you recognize the voice of Pat Buttram?
Yeah. He's been in a lot of Disney movies. So.
Yep. They even said, most people my age would probably know him best as the Sheriff of Nottingham from Disney's Robin Hood. And I said, yes.
Yeah, I mean, great stuff, So I think they did just a good job with all of it. And I mean, gosh, they even shoot in Monument Valley. The classic location. Makes no sense that it would be anywhere near California, Monument Valley, but and be close to the town where he lives. But so beautiful to actually shoot there. One of the most iconic places in the world for Westerns, and especially made famous by John Ford with the films that he did. And so, and it just looks beautiful. I mean, I think that's one of the things that really works in this movie too, is with the Western, the cinematography that they use in the movie is just phenomenal. So I really, really love it. I think they did just a bang up job here, with deciding, hey, let's go out with a bang and have a ton of fun with this. So
literally with a bang.
Yes. Yeah, that's true. An absolute thing.
With a shootout in the street.
Well, that, and you're blowing up a train. Yeah. So we kind of touched on this a little bit, but the idea of the fact that this movie is really going to be a softening for Doc Brown as a character. His character arc is going to be one, he starts off the series very much a scientist. I love how you'd put in the notes, he becomes a scientist because of his love for Jules Verne. So there's kind of this romanticism about that for him, right? And yet at the same time, because of that, he's become just quite a very logical and, very, I think, removed person from like his feelings. And this movie puts that front and center for him, and makes him really the emotional one of the series, which I think is quite phenomenal, actually, because instead of Doc Brown continuing to be this kind of one-dimensional character, we really flesh out the character and make him, in many ways, just a fully fledged human being.
100%. And, we've talked about before my love specifically for Christopher Lloyd. And I think that it's so cool to see, for one, him as an actor getting his first on-screen kiss, but also just, especially Doc Brown getting to have this other side that you finally see. That, it is sort of a trait you see a lot in scientists portrayed in movies and TV, that it's all about the logic in the head and nothing about the heart, or that maybe there's some reason that they have stepped away from noticing their feelings and addressing that at all. So it also really makes sense that he ends up with a teacher, because they have this mutual respect for each other as two interesting minds that want to get to know what each other's all about, but also that they had that common tie of both loving Jules Verne's work. And it's sort of that, click where it wasn't just love at first sight. Yes, they were enamored with each other, but it also grew because they realized, wow, I've found my match. And so I think it was such a nice moment, the two of them bonding while they're looking through the telescope.
Yeah, I think that you're absolutely right in that, because I think that their relationship becomes much more about, I would say, a mingling of souls. Like that's what attracts them to each other is their common loves. They have a lot of common interests. And they find, the other's curiosity in the world to be very attractive, and I think, that's something that you can't replace in a relationship. And, you're married and I'm married, and that's one of the big things that makes a marriage work, is that you do have enough common interests that you can share together that continue to bring you together, and instead of growing apart. And obviously, as you move forward in life, it does become about, I think, growing in a way that you continue that process, because it's not going to be automatic. But I think there's a real beauty just in that here for where we see Doc Brown going, and again, it changes his character and makes him more human. And I think that's what you want at this point in the film series, is you want this character to come alive in a way that he hasn't come alive before. And I do think it's really smart because, in many ways, this movie is just as much about him as it is Marty in that sense. And I think that that's also smart, because we've been following, these characters for this long. And it's important, I think, to finally get an opportunity to know, who this character is all the way through.
Yeah, and exactly what you said, where it's not just a movie about Marty anymore. And not that that was a bad thing, obviously. Like, we loved the first one. It's just interesting to actually get to see what else is there for Doc Brown besides his father-son kind of relationship with Marty. What else does he have going on in his life aside from Marty and the time machine? Now we're finally getting some answers to those questions, or maybe that's something he always wanted. And that he eventually kind of has that character turn, or doesn't kind of, he does, where before it seemed like he was the one always in a panic about, well, we've got to travel again, either in the future or in the past, to fix this. And he was, constantly in a panic. And now he's the one that decided he wanted to stay in the time he was in for the love of someone else. And it's no longer just about fixing Marty's past or future. It's about, what do I want my life to be like? And maybe it's not all going to be exactly just so.
Well, and I guess as the song goes, you don't want love to pass you by. And so I think that's something that, I think you're absolutely right in talking about the fact that, this is not something I think he ever really thought of himself, experiencing or having happen to him. And, when that's the case, you don't know what you're missing. You don't know how it's going to affect you. And so the fact that, it's finally happened to him, there's actually a whole other experience in life now that Doc Brown is having that is going to make him a better person, because he has a fuller, richer understanding of all of human existence and not just this segmented part of it, which, made it really interesting, when he tells Marty, and this is something that stood out to me when he was like, I have to live my life according to what I believe is right in my heart. And I was just like, man, it sounds so good, but it's such terrible advice, even to yourself, because you can't just follow your heart. And that's one of the things I think is interesting, is that Marty kind of points out to Doc, it's like, you have more than a heart for a reason. You have your heart and your mind. Like, you're meant to put those two things together, because if you're following just one, you're missing out, right? And so Doc has always lived with his mind, and now he's just living with his heart, and it's like there's always going to be something missing. And it's like, hearts make us want to do things that aren't right all the time, and so just saying we should follow our hearts is really bad advice.
Well, and then too, he's kind of saying, you were always the one who told me, not me telling you, that we can't mess with the space-time continuum.
Right.
And now you're spitting in the face of that. What happened to the rules?
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. Again, it's one of those things where you see the reason why we don't just trust our hearts, because their hearts make us want to do things that aren't necessarily the wisest thing to do. And so, absolutely.
That aren't logical.
Yeah, exactly. Speaking of Doc Brown, how did you feel then his relationship with Clara worked?
I thought it was pretty good. I think there were some situations here and there where I wasn't necessarily sure the chemistry between the two actors that were in the scenes together. I think that maybe they could have had a different actress to play his love interest, but I've seen her in other things and she's fine. It just, sometimes it seemed a little clunky to me. In particular, just the scene where he has to tell her goodbye on her porch, and she turns him telling the truth into it's a way for him to try and take advantage of her. It just seemed a little weird to me and didn't quite feel genuine. But aside from that, I think that the idea is very sweet. And I think that they had some, like I mentioned before, really great moments, like when they're bonding over things that, two people that are the same kind of person in their soul would bond over. And, I think that the chase scene at the end and the way that they wrap up his story is really sweet. So it's just that one or two little places that bothered me.
I can totally understand what you're saying there. I think Mary Steenburgen, I've seen her in plenty of things, and of course, yeah, I think most people, if she's not coming to mind, just think of the mom in Elf. Like that's who she is,
right?
And I do feel like in this movie, there's a tendency for her to slightly overact her scenes, and I think that is part of what I see in those parts. It's like, I think if maybe she had just underplayed them a little bit more, they might have worked a little bit better, because it might have felt a little bit more realistic, like it's coming from a real place, instead of this kind of like hyper emotional, over the top area. And I think that's the thing that kind of, I think it works for the most part. I do think, like you, there's just some scenes where it feels like a little bit too... Like, I know this movie is big and goofy and everything, but I think these emotional scenes like this needed to feel a little bit more real. And I would say that the emotional scenes that, say, like we were talking about earlier, where you have between Doc and Marty, where they're having these confrontations about these big issues, I think those feel great between those two actors, and part of that is because I think it's the scenes are being played with a slight more seriousness because of the serious nature of, like, we've already seen what time travel can do and the messes you can make, and so I think just those scenes between him and Clara would have really helped to have a little bit more of that grounding for that relationship. So maybe I felt even more about it than I do just as I watch it as it is.
Yeah, I think you hit the nail on the head with that, because too, I'm kind of thinking of the dance scene even was just a little awkward. And I think that maybe it would have been better if she had toned it down a little bit. Maybe it felt more like stage acting rather than film acting a couple of times. But I'm also not an actress, so Mary, please don't kill me.
Well, and that makes me think of, we didn't put on the outline, but just something I was thinking of as we were talking about acting, because we had kind of knocked Thomas F. Wilson a little bit down for the second movie. But, I thought him playing Mad Dog here played off better, and part of that, I think, is because he's playing very much into the character trope of the evil Western bad guy. And I think his portrayal of that came across on screen much better, and part of that is because he's not playing Biff or a version of Biff, and I think that helps. To kind of have him a little bit removed from that, and so, but he's still got some of the same characteristics, which is funny. So I thought his job here of playing Mad Dog, it worked for the movie really well, and it turned out to be pretty funny. And I think the best part they do in here is they do not spend a ton of time with him as a character, because I think we spent enough time with that type of character in the second movie, and this movie is really more about Doc and Marty, and who they're going to be. But
yeah, he definitely sold it. I mean, heck, that's why I brought up Mad Dog when we started tonight, was because he just, first of all, the facial hair, it's great. Love the Fu Manchu. And, he actually, as an actor, made sure that he really did research on being the most accurate Western star he could, and actually learned how to do his own stunts and horseback ride for this movie. So that was really cool. And I think you can see that authenticity now in this movie. And I do think it was a good idea, like you said, that they limited his character a little bit more, but also just that he toned it down and didn't make it quite so goofy and over the top. I think that it's really believable, especially in the scenes where, you think he's actually shot Marty for a minute there, or at the dance when he has to hand over his guns and his knife and then still finds a way to sneak another gun in there, and he's only got one bullet. He's so dedicated, I feel like, in this movie to really pulling off the villain that's believable in a Western way.
Yeah. No, I think you're absolutely right, and I'm glad that that's the case, because I think it makes this movie just work better in that sense. And I think, something that we had mentioned in the second part is when we were talking about, Marty and his predilection for falling under the sway of people calling him chicken, which we didn't necessarily think worked there in that movie, because it just felt like a little bit out of the blue, and not something that I feel like I was thinking about it this week, and I felt like they could have set that up in the first movie itself by kind of having Marty be somebody who's picked on a little bit because he's not the tallest guy in his school and those kind of things, and so be somebody who is seen as kind of wanting to prove himself in that area, and so kind of building that foundation for this whole thing. But, I love the fact that this becomes about making the right choices, because, Marty does have to learn to not let other people dictate his actions, in the sense that, there are going to be those people in this world who want to push our buttons specifically to, quote unquote, make us do something. And yet nobody can make us do anything. It is our choice how we react to them, no matter how awful they are. And so that's the thing I think that I really liked about this movie, because him kind of not learning to fight with people on their terms was really key. And then, like, his whole idea is like, why would I care what this, a-hole thinks of me? Like,
Yep.
that's a really mature place to go. So it was nice to see him grow and them take that part of the movie in part 2 that I didn't think worked as well and really transform that into something that I think worked very well in this movie, and it made it worth it then.
Yes. Ugh, I breathed such a sigh of relief when they decided to go that direction. In the moment when he says, "No, I'm not going to do that. This guy's a jerk." I was going, yes. Like, finally, like, I feel like the audience as a whole is going, yeah, just tell him that you're not going to play his game and that you've got better things to spend your time on and, you know, walk away instead of being prey to his trap. I mean, yeah, I think that could be said for anything in life. There's things going on in our own lives right now where you know that there's people trying to bait you, and you can just choose to be the bigger person and walk away. And I never got the whole chicken thing anyway either. So I guess too, maybe it was the choice of words. I feel like if someone was going to call me chicken nowadays, it would be more likely to be like, "You're a loser" or something like that, instead of, "What are you, chicken?"
Yeah. No, I agree. Yeah, apparently he just needed to take Ace of Base's advice and don't turn around.
Exactly.
But I think that's something that was really great about the way that they did it in this movie, because he doesn't respond on their terms. You know, what we see here is he's then able to plan to keep himself alive. You know, he realizes he can't beat him in a quick draw when he's thinking with his brain and not just his heart. And I think this is one of the things where the movie really shows you what the theme is, which is to use all the abilities that you've been given in your brain and your heart work together to help you make the right decisions. And the ones that, you know, obviously this whole movie is about the making the right choices, because as we talked about last time, and the time before that, it's the consequences of those actions that make what your life is going to be in the future. And one small choice that you make could radically alter your future for the detriment of your future. And we just don't necessarily think about that. So that's why I think this movie shows we have to be very careful in the types of situations that we get ourselves into, and then the choices that we make in those situations. And so, you know, in the end, when he doesn't race needles, you know, it's a win, which also that's where Solo, when he's like, "My pound needles," that's where that comes from. So it's a Back to the Future reference. So I like that. I think, to me, it was another way in which 2 kind of gets redeemed, or really helps that thematic element come out much stronger and lead towards a really good end to the series and to the character arc for Marty, so that, you know, in many ways, this storyline has been about Marty becoming a little bit more like Doc and Doc becoming a little bit more like Marty, and both of them being better for it.
100%. And I hate to repeat myself, but yeah, that was the biggest thing that I took away from it too. I really love when Doc says at the end, "Your future isn't written yet," because it's like encompassing what you're saying with, you know, making the right choices, and that things that you do can affect your future. And also, it's sort of like this other quote I've heard that's like, "It's your story, hit them with a plot twist whenever you want." You know, that your future is not predetermined either. And I think that kind of turns their own story of Back to the Future on its head, because previously they thought it was all predetermined and we've got to make sure it stays the same so that, you know, Marty would still exist and things like that in the future. But then also he's realizing some things that you do differently can make your life turn out better or worse than this possibility. There's a million different directions you could go, and you don't have to feel like you're stuck in one.
Well, and I mean, your history is open, but it's also written by the choices you make now. And so, you know, you want to make the wisest decisions that you can make. And I think that's what we're trying to get to in this movie, to help all of us to see, is that, yeah, your future can be as open as possible, and except for the decisions you make now. And so, good or bad, it's going to be about what you do now that makes that future happen. I think one of the things that I really appreciated about the movie was this kind of like look at history, and by going back and getting to know, Marty gets to know his parents, and then he gets to know his great-great-grandparents through this movie.
Mm-hmm.
He gets this opportunity that's really neat, and I think it shows the validity of not just knowing like history in general, but your own personal history. Like, it is good for us to know where we come from, like what our families have been through years ago, to kind of give us this sense of like, what is it that makes you who you are now? Like, what has kind of been birthed into you from birth from all of the things that come from your family line, And so getting that opportunity to see that through his parents and his great-great-grandparents, and I think it gives Marty a greater appreciation for everything he has in his life. I mean, just think about this, it's so neat. When he gets to see where his grandparents came from, his great-great-grandparents came from, they have their first son here as they came over to America, and they live in this small house. It's nice, but I mean, it's the Old West. It's this tiny little house, and they're eking out a living here in America. And then he knows where he's going to go in the future, and like you just see that progression of the way things are continuing to get better for him and his family. But if you think about that, they only do that if the right choices get made by the people in his family in each successive generation, and he has to be a important link in that chain. And so if you know where you've come from, you can know better where you are and how to make yourselves even better in the future. And part of that is by learning from the past, how to not make the same mistakes that maybe parents made or grandparents made, or looking at the larger role of history, I think, and being able to see where people like yourself have made mistakes, in the past, and learning from those. And so I really love this idea of like the importance of history in all of its senses to allow Marty as a character specifically to really be able to kind of blossom and grow into this person who is going to be much more successful in the future. And it all starts with him getting back and deciding, no, I'm not going to race this guy. He's just a jerk. Who cares? Yeah,
I think it really meant a lot to me as well, especially since they were talking about the history of his family line, and in particular with them being from Ireland. And actually, that's where part of my mom's family is from. My grandmother was Irish and my grandfather was German. And they weren't the first generation born here, but not long before them. So it also had that personal meaning to me of, wow, I always loved looking back at those kind of things too and learning more about where my family came from. So yeah, I think it's definitely another element that adds to making this movie so meaningful and authentic feeling, because it's got these elements to it, like remember where you came from or learn about where you came from, and that can help you move forward.
How did this is one question that I had for you. How did you end up feeling about Michael Fox and Leah Thompson playing the ancestors? Did that work for you?
I did notice it was a little weird having him playing the role that would have been given probably to Crispin Glover before, but I know they had to find another way around that again. So I just kind of went with it. I saw what they did and I was like, okay, whatever. But I could understand how it might bother some people, because it would be like, he's playing his own great-great-grandfather. But yeah, I thought he did a great job at an Irish accent, and looked actually adorable with the facial hair and the derby hat. And I thought Leah Thompson did a good job. She was, more of a background character in this one, but I think that she kind of needed to be to have that growth for Doc and Marty.
Yeah. So I think, him playing the role of his great-great-grandfather works fine. It's one of those things where it's almost like the looks you get come down from different generations in different ways,
Yeah.
and so the fact that his great-great-grandfather looked more like him, it's like, okay, that works. Leah Thompson playing is totally not, I mean, she shouldn't be in this movie at all. I think it's ridiculous because there's no way that his great-great-grandmother would look anything like his mother.
Good point.
Because this is the McFly family. She's not
Exactly.
a McFly,
It would come from his father's side.
Exactly. So having that in there really threw me off, and I get why they did it because it's kind of funny, and of course she's able to kind of like wake him up the way he has in all the other movies.
Yeah.
But it just doesn't work logically whatsoever, and I think it's a mistake that they made that they shouldn't have made. I know why they did it because they wanted to have Leah Thompson in the movie, and I think they probably thought to themselves, "Oh, this will be kind of a cute wink, right?" But it's the wrong choice because it doesn't make any logical sense, and so it's not like it's awful or it's the worst idea ever, and it totally ruins the movie. But I just think it ruins what they're going for with the movie to have this be his great-great-grandparents when there's no way at all that she would look anything like, his mother. It just wouldn't be possible. So
Yeah. No, I'm with you on that. And yeah, I mean, like I said, I just kind of went along with what they were doing. I could tell what they were trying to do and, all of the nods to the previous two. But yeah, I think that they could have made a better choice to make it make sense with genealogy.
One of the things that stood out to me, too, is the fact that this is a Western, and I really liked how, with the music, that Silvestri turned a lot of the themes and gave them that Western slant, and then just straight up did some fun Western-style music, and in the sense of hearkening back to all of those, great Westerns that we grew up with John Wayne and stuff like that. And I just thought, what a fun way to, end the series musically, because the first movie had been so strong musically. And of course, you're not going to have as many pop songs in the movie, but we do have ZZ Top show up at the party, which is fun. And they wrote that song that they play, which is fantastic, So, I thought, again, this is one of those places where Silvestri just kind of knocks it out of the park, and it's so much fun.
Well, and he actually apparently won a Saturn Award for Best Music for this one. So I think that obviously it spoke to a lot of people for that reason. But then, too, I think for one, it was great that they made the decision to have the same person work on all three, which, I mean, we knew originally 2 and 3 were going to be one movie. So I guess we could say both movies instead of all three. But yeah, you can really tell that he not only takes the themes that they originally came up with for Back to the Future, but also melding it well with Western style music to give you that Old West feeling, and then also to liven it up, like, especially in the scene where he makes Marty dance and then he actually starts dancing, or the train chase at the end. I think that it was really something that I don't always notice as much, but here for sure it was incredible and totally wouldn't have been the same without it.
Yeah, no, I definitely agree with you. So, I question before we kind of get to our ratings, but how do you feel like then this, every trilogy of the 80s, whether it was for a while, obviously Indiana Jones was a trilogy or Star Wars was a trilogy, and so wrapping up a trilogy is never easy, or gosh, even like Godfather parts 1, 2, and 3. So how does this wrap up this trilogy for you?
I think that they wrapped it up in a really nice way with getting to have Doc come back briefly and let Marty know he's okay. They don't just leave it on that note of Marty always wondering if Doc made it and got to live out his dream with the woman he loved or not. I think too, it could have been a little bit less weird if they found a different way to handle the train taking off. that kind of took me out of it a little bit, but I got what they were doing. And I kind of give them a break because, originally when they made the first Back to the Future movie, they didn't know that they were going to be making more. So then they're going, oh, great. So we are going to come back and make more. And then they're probably unsure how to wrap it up. So like I said, I kind of give them slack for that, but I think overall it's a really warm and fuzzy feeling that you walk away with, and that's what I would have wanted.
Yeah, no, I mean, for the most part, I think I really agree with you. I think that I would say the movie, I don't think it needed to bring Doc back. I think it's a little over silly. Part of the whole reasons, he goes back to the future or back to the past, is the fact that, Doc can't fix the time machine back then,
Right.
And then for all of a sudden for him to just kind of be able to build a locomotive time machine seems a little bit silly. And I mean, I guess you can rationalize that his experience with the train made him, think of things in a new way or whatever. But it does seem like a little bit silly. And it kind of puts it it kind of makes you think that question of like, wait, if he could do that the whole time, like, why did we have to go and have this whole adventure anyway? So I think it would have been a little bit stronger for me if Doc had not come back and Marty just looked him up, basically, and knew that he was happy and healthy and all of those things. And that you could have had the grandfather paradox where he was his own grandfather in the end. So like the Doc Brown that he knew was the great-great-grandson of the Doc Brown that, so that would have been, I think, maybe even a little bit funnier and a little bit more clever if we're going to play with time travel. The whole question, can you be your own great-grandfather? So that something like that, I think it would have been a little bit funny. But in the end, I think, I come away from this much more satisfied, obviously, than I did the second movie. And I think it makes the second movie better, as we talked about thematically. And I think it's a lot more fun. And it's just a rip-roaring good adventure. And it's actually, like Back to the Future is a movie you can watch on its own. And I feel like this one is a movie I can just watch on its own. 2 feels like I need to watch 3 to make it feel legitimate for watching, because it just, it needs that ending. Whereas 3 almost felt like I didn't necessarily have to have 2 at all. I just need a few bits and pieces from 2. Otherwise, I can just enjoy this one for what it is. And I think that's great. And I'm as it wrapping up the trilogy and the last Back to the Future movie we'll ever get, I'm very satisfied with that. And so I guess that all comes down to then, Christy, what you'd rate Back to the Future 3.
So I thought long and hard about it, and I have to go a little bit in between ratings here, and I would give it a 4.5 out of 5 one bullet pistols because that gun was just so darn cute. Because it's just got so many really nice things about it that warm my heart and make me glad that we're getting this good of a wrap up to everything. And also still wishing that someday we could have more, but that's where I guess I start writing my own headcanon. I really enjoyed it. This was actually my first viewing ever of part 3. So I think that it was awesome.
Yeah, I think for me, I would say, I think on Letterboxd I gave this 4 out of 5 stars, but it would truly be more like 3.75 out of 5.
Oh,
and
okay.
That's partly because I gave the first movie 4, and this doesn't deserve 4 compared to that. So I'm just comparing for the trilogy itself.
Okay.
But to me, this is almost as good as the first one in the sense that I enjoy watching it as much as I do the first one. So there are just a few more things where I kind of have a little bit more of an issue here or there. But on a whole, I think it's a great, like I said, wrap up to the trilogy. And I really had a blast watching it again. It had been a long time. And I honestly was surprised when Doc Brown came back because I totally forgot, because that's how long it's been since I'd seen this. So, yeah, I mean, it's a good trilogy then. I think, to like 2 out of the 3 movies in any trilogy is a good deal. especially when so many trilogies went completely south. When you consider, like, oh gosh, Jaws movies and Rambo movies and all those kind of things, and Rocky movies, and you just kept going and going and going. Superman movies. So Superman 3 is not good. Anyway, that's a whole other story. But Christy, before I diverge into that, it's time for some recommendations for the week. And so what are you going to be recommending to everyone?
Oh, that's tough. I toyed with the idea of, do I need to recommend a Western this time because we're talking about a Western? But I mean, then it's just really unfair, because how do you pick your favorite Western? I think most of them are pretty good. So I'm just not going to do it. I'm going to say I love most Westerns I've seen. So I'm actually going to throw out a wild card here and go with something that I was reminded of recently that I haven't watched in a long time and I really love. And that's a movie with Kevin Costner called Dragonfly. I don't know if you've ever seen it. But actually, it's a story about a guy who, it's not a real story or anything like that, but just a really interesting movie about a guy whose wife is on a mission trip and gets lost. And so he still believes she's out there somewhere and is on a mission to find her in the jungle, I think in Africa somewhere. And so it's just a really interesting story about him kind of going on this journey of like having the faith that she's still alive and he's going to find her. And also never having been in a foreign country before, much less the jungle. And that dragonflies are her favorite animal or insect or whatever. And so he keeps seeing signs that, he'll see dragonflies everywhere. And so it just, every time I see a dragonfly now, I'm reminded fondly of that movie, and I highly recommend it.
Nice. Yeah, that's one I've not seen, so I'll have to check that out. For me, I'm going to recommend something that my wife and I just finished on Netflix, and it is The Queen's Gambit. And if you haven't seen The Queen's Gambit, it is amazing. It is so good. It is a limited series, so it's just one season. It's 7 episodes. It's based off a book. I've not read the book, but this is a phenomenal series. Anna Taylor-Joy, who's been in a lot of things recently, most recently was in New Mutants that had just come out, which, not a great movie, but she was in it. She's so good in this. It's about a young girl who is a chess prodigy, and she makes her way through the world of chess and isolation. And so it's just so well done. It's so well acted. It's just, we ate it up. So if you're looking for something to watch over the holiday season, you want a few episodes here and there to be able to watch. Honestly, it's something that you could at the holiday season when you have some days off, you could probably binge the whole thing in one day just because you want to keep going. But yeah, I highly recommend The Queen's Gambit. So, Christy, if people want to catch up with you though and see what you've got going on, where can they find you?
You can find me on Instagram and Twitter at BestBenBell. And I am also on Facebook on occasion, popping in the Babel Conference. And then when I'm not here on 602 Club with Matt, I do another show with my friend Teresa Delgado called Sabers and Spells, where we've talked about Stranger Things and My Little Pony and Star Wars, and who knows where we'll go next. Maybe we'll do next season of Stranger Things. Maybe we'll talk about The Witcher. I'm campaigning for The Witcher, just FYI. So please follow us there as well.
And you can find me on Twitter, Instagram, Letterboxd, Vero, under the name MattRushing02. Pretty much any social media platform in the end where you could possibly find me. Just search for MattRushing02. I might be there. You can also find me here on the network doing Literary Treks as well as The Orb. Literary Treks is about the books and the comics of Star Trek. And then The Orb is about Star Trek Deep Space Nine. You can find me over on the Nerd Party Network. I do 2 shows. One is called Owl Post with Drea Kaufman. We're doing the Harry Potter series, 1 chapter at a time. And I think we've got 15 episodes left now, so it's getting close. You can also find me doing Aggressive Negotiations with John Mills. As every week we are talking about a really fun Star Wars topic this week. It's Thanks Gungan, where we talk about all of the things that we are thankful for in the Star Wars universe and what's been happening in Star Wars universe. So, yes, so exciting. So check that out. But, Christy, we want to thank everybody for joining us.
And y'all come back now, you hear?